Hey, what's up, guys? This is Carlos Garcia and Winslow Lowe,
What's up?
and you are listening to The Creative Whole, a podcast where we cover books and big ideas and we talk about them and how they apply to life and all that good stuff. So join us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. So, what's the book that we're going over today, Carlos?
Today, we are going over Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way.
Okay, so when we're talking about obstacle in the way, it pretty much focuses on three, I guess, big ideas. A lot of times it would be the perception of something, the action of something, and the will. And those are the three ingredients to flipping any situation, to taking a negative and turning it into a positive. But today we are going to go over perception.
I like the flipping any situation kind of. I like that. I like the flip situations.
Well, I mean, it always comes down to the whole thing of, well, as it says, turning a positive into a negative. And I think the obstacle is the way. I think it puts a lot of things into perspective. So there was
literally,
literally, yes. So there was the quote that he put in his book, the Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. What he said was, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. So what is your big take on that, Carlos?
Well, I think this is after me and you had to kind of talk about this quote for a minute because
yes.
it wasn't clicking right away in my little pea brain. But my takeaway from that is that the impediment is the problem or the situation that gets in the way of your goal, but that is actually the invitation for your own personal growth and development. It's actually the way you need to go. And that is better than avoiding it or trying to go around it, but to go through it, enter into it.
Yes, and I pretty much kind of agree with what you said. So pretty much whatever that obstacle is the obstacle that's going to help you get further. Because I do believe in the whole thing of you grow pretty much. What is that saying? Like you grow in the, not in the fire, but you grow in the heartache and the pain. And that's pretty much the part where you turn into this phoenix. What is the whole phoenix?
Yeah.
The whole phoenix thing?
I don't know the specific story, but I'm familiar with the phoenix. But I think
rising from the ashes type of thing.
Rising from the ashes. And so basically it's kind of like no one grows during times of comfort, right? We grow usually in hindsight as we look back. It was during times of pain, turmoil, heartache, hardships, obstacles, challenges. Those are the times where we're stretched and we're stressed and we have to work through it. Dig deep. You know, those roots start searching for water because we don't have the resources in of ourselves.
So another thing that I would like to bring up is how within the book it was talking about how each obstacle, each impediment, each thing that seems to be blocking to success is itself the path to success. So it kind of goes over with what the quote from Marcus Aurelius is kind of talking about. So the first one that we are going to be talking about, because like I said, for the most part, it goes over like three key ideas, which is perception, action, and will. For the most part today, what we're going to be discussing will be perception. Their big thing would be, with perception, the opportunity in adversity. So what you got on that, Carlos?
Well, I think that that's the key word in there is opportunity, is being able to change your point of reference to basically catch yourself and not respond emotionally, and to learn how to be more logical and rational in your response to a situation, and to see it how it actually is an invitation. It's an opportunity, And, you know, it's just how you look at it.
So, so I would say like the biggest thing is within somebody's perception, it always comes down to like we always just talk about, which will be creating that other narrative, the other story to whatever it may be. Because yes, it might seem like everything is going bad, but it kind of goes back to what we were talking about maybe a few minutes ago, about flipping it and turning a negative into a positive. Even though it might be hard, but within that, it comes the opportunity. Pretty much like the whole thing with like the example that they gave, which was the Rockefeller. And so what was his big thing? Do you remember?
Oh, I know that it was during like a depression or a economic, you know, downset that while everyone else was panicking, he chose not to panic and he chose to observe what everyone else was doing in order for him to learn from the situation, in order to know how to take advantage, leverage it to his own uh, betterment, to position him better.
Yeah. So I think the big thing would be like, because I mean, I can't necessarily imagine what he was probably going through within this whole thing, but in my head, what I picture is everybody's like running around like with their head cut off type of thing and running in chaos, and he just kind of like looking around. Falling. Yeah, just kind of like looking around, being like, okay, well, I'm gonna see what everybody's doing, and I'm going to pretty much flip it. I'm gonna make it into something that's going to benefit me in the long run, because especially it's easy for anybody to, I guess, to follow the leader. I guess if you see everybody else running in panic, then a lot of times you're going to probably run in panic. But his big thing was pretty much watching what everybody is doing wrong in the present and kind of taking that so he can advance, pretty much find the opportunity in the adversity of the pretty much economic downfall, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you were.
No, go on.
I think a good example of that is, you know, what we just recently experienced with COVID, right? I mean, that's a prime example of being able to slow down and reflect and look back. And, you know, we're a little bit more prepared now if we ever hit a pandemic again. We know some of the potential strategies that our country would take and that the world took. And we know how bad it can get. And we know how much can be hyped up. We know how much can be the kind of conflict that came out of it. And so that was a lot of education there. There's a lot of learning to be had by paying attention to how everyone was reacting and responding to the situation.
Well, pretty much with that, I remember hearing from somewhere that pretty much a lot of things that happened, it just kind of jump started everything. So eventually,
like 10 years, right?
Yeah, like 5 or 10 years or something like that. Like eventually, probably things would maybe be remote, just because like people are, I guess the higher ups would probably be thinking like, okay, well, if they do it from home, it's going to cut down on the cost of electricity at an actual building. It's going to cut the cost of the building and a bunch of other things. So,
and you're referring to businesses and organizations,
right? Correct. But I think for the most part with a lot of people, it did have everybody slow down and to take a look around. Yeah. Because it comes down to what everybody's going to see, and then pretty much go forward from there. Because if you're always running around, you're never going to be able to stop to kind of take in everything. Yep. So another key point that I saw would be, if you're faced with a major obstacle, you could try these 3 things. So one of the big ones that it was talking about would be about like focus on what you can control and ignore what you cannot. So like my big takeaway with that would be no matter how much you try to change something, if you can't, like, ignore it. And it can be something as easy as, like, in the practical sense, like, I don't know, I'll just take, like, I guess I could use this example in a few things. One would be like driving. So I used to have like a little bit of road rage, I guess, when I was younger. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, I would be driving around. I don't know, somebody's driving slow or whatever the case may be. Like, I can't change what they're doing, like in any aspect. So I'm just going to ignore it, or I'm going to flip the script. Because I don't know what's going on. Like, maybe they're triggered by fast cars or something. I don't know. So since I can't control it, I just ignore it. But a lot of times, I mean, there might be other like practical things that people do that with. Like when it comes to that, like, can you think of any like practical applications with the whole focusing?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Especially like say for example, like in a work environment, right? Um, there's a lot of moving pieces. Sometimes there's changes that come down from administration or your boss or whatever. And there's a lot of that stuff you can't control. You can get mad, you can get upset, you can get stressed. A lot of it you can't control. You're either going to keep stick with your job or you're going to leave your job or your performance is going to sink because you're not able to adjust, right? And so being able to focus on what you can control, right, empowers you instead of having a disempowered mindset, so to speak. All these things may concern you and you may have great ideas, but if you don't have access to the controls, if you don't have that type of authority, right, you need to focus for your own mental health, for your own stress, for your own emotional well-being, and quality of life. It's good to know, what, I'm just going to surrender trying to fight this system or trying to fight this situation, trying to get it to go my way, um, and learn how to focus on what I do have influence over.
So it almost
Because there's
comes
a lot
down
of
to it almost
oh, go
comes
ahead.
down to that thing that you were talking about earlier with the whole like COVID thing. Um,
Right.
like we can't control anything that happened with that, whether you agree or not. Like there's nothing that we can do. Like some people, they had to quarantine for ever, or whatever the case may be. But so you can either choose that time to find the opportunity in it, or you can get mad at the world.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
It's a
so
choice.
yeah, and it all comes down to the choice, whether
Yes,
it be
sir.
good or whether it be bad. Like it does come down to the choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so number two would be kind of like remain objective. Don't get caught up in subjective emotions or projections. Um, so what do you think about that?
Well, I think
Silos.
that definitely takes self-discipline, discipline of your mind, to be able to think rationally, to make sure that it's something that we talk about like in classes that I teach. Make sure that your I is above E, your intelligence is above your emotional, state. Because if you have too much emotion, right, then the I ends up taking over the E ends up taking over the I, and then you're all emotion. And when you're filled with emotion, it's like colored glasses. It forces you to see everything right through that certain lens. And so it takes discipline to slow down, to pay attention to what the facts are, because facts are our friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And learn the difference between facts and opinions, and not letting your fears dictate your line of reasoning, right? And that's where I think those projections, it says up there, don't get caught up in subjective emotions or projections, because that's something that is very human to project onto others our fears or our concerns, right? Which ends up creating sometimes self-inflicted wounds because it creates stress in our relationships and things of that nature, right?
So I think the big thing is like to remain objective. And I just think in general, to be objective will pay off in the end. Just like you said, facts are our friends. No matter how much you don't believe that the facts are right, but if it's backed by other things,
Evidence.
then yeah, then it comes down to like, don't put your emotions into it, because emotions will definitely have you all over the place. And it's just not one of those things that you should do. Um, that's just, I don't know. That's just how I feel. Like being subjective to something, it's just too much emotion, too much feeling. Now, you might be right in some of it, but some of it you might not be. And if you're not objective, if you don't remain objective, then it's going to sway whatever the outcome could be, which I don't think is particularly good.
Yeah. I think too, just real quick, Winslow, I think that also, lends to leadership, right? Whether it's leadership in your home, right, within your family, leadership at work or a team sport or whatever. It's usually the person who can, who can bring reason to the table, right? And they get buy-in from others because what they're saying makes sense. And people are not, focusing on the emotion, right, or the heat, of the situation. They're able to focus on the light. So it helps in
Lens of
those.
leadership.
Yep,
I like
definitely.
that. Okay, so before I go into the third one, pretty much we're talking about three things that you can do when faced with a major obstacle. First one was focus on what you can control, ignore what you cannot. The second one was remain objective, don't get caught up in subjective emotions or projections. And this third one is stay in the present moment. Don't spiral into regrets about the past or worry about the future. Now, I know it's always good to stay in the present. Because me, for example, I have a habit of spiraling into the future, or spiraling into a rabbit hole when I'm on YouTube or something. Like I could be looking about rabbits and then all of a sudden I'm looking
Squirrels.
at squirrels because I'm probably squirreling. Um, so yeah, so I think it's definitely important to stay in the present and not to worry about the past or the past or the present, the future. With the future, it comes down to the whole thing of focus on what you can control. I think it kind of goes back to number one, focus on what you can control, because you can't control, for the most part, the future. I mean, you could kind of lead it um, to where you want to go, but about like, I don't know, in a sense, like willing it into the future, like, oh, this is exactly what's going to happen. I think that's a little much. So it kind of comes down to pretty much focus on what you can control, and you can't
Yeah.
control the future.
Yeah, even just this morning, this makes me think. I was writing down that if you focus on the past, you get depressed. If you focus on the future, you get anxiety. But if you focus on the present, you get peace.
I
Right?
like that.
And that's what this reminds me of, because it's really easy to go start letting the past paralyze you and letting the future just overwhelm you, because you're thinking about all this stuff that, you have to do, woulda, coulda, shoulda. And it's like all you can control. Tomorrow's not even promised, it's like today is right now is all you got. What are you going to
Right
do?
now
It
is
doesn't.
now.
Now, does that mean don't find healing from your past? Does that mean don't plan for the future? No, it just means keep things in their proper perspective, right? And if you can stay present, then you're able to give a more objective uh, perspective to things.
I like that. Past goes into worries.
Yep.
Present is peace. Future is anxiety.
Well, actually, past goes into depression.
Past depression.
Yeah,
Okay.
focusing on the past will lead you to depression. Focusing on the future creates the anxieties and the worries.
Present is peace.
Present is peace.
I like that. So one of the second parts of the perception would be about recognizing your power. Um, so one of the big things about recognizing your power is that it's a choice. Um, so I mean, the big thing that they were talking about in the book is about how you could give up, you could relinquish your power and submit to the situation, or hold on to your power despite the situation. Um, so the big thing that they discussed in this book was the story about Reuben Hurricane. What was his name?
Carter.
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 Yes, the boxer. Um, so like,
What happened to
what
him?
did so the thing that happened to him was he got set up for, what was it, like a triple murder or something like that.
Like
Um,
triple life sentence.
yeah, for crimes that he didn't even commit. Um, so his thing was just that he wasn't going to submit to anybody in the prison, like the warden, submit, like giving up his power. Um, like he knew that he was going to be stuck. He was going to be confined into the prison, but he chose. His choice was to pretty much leave himself with power, um, leave himself with the power, and not give it to anybody else. And that's probably a good thing. Because I mean, he could have just, I guess, I don't know, been too much about like the future, and he could have got anxious and everything else, and like, I know I didn't do these, I'm gonna be mad at the world, I'm gonna, I don't know, hurt everybody and anything.
Focus on the injustices of the past,
Yeah.
right?
But his big thing was that he chose pretty much the path of power, because I think a lot has, well, you were talking about earlier, I think we do have a lot when we have the power.
Yeah.
When,
And I think it's really shifting, catching yourself, because there's something that Donald Miller talks about, and he's really big into like he used to just write stories and just books that were more like just from his heart, I guess. And now he's writing business books and doing business, right? But because he loves narrative and story so much, he teaches businesses about the power of story. And one of the things he says that has stuck with me is says, and within every single one of us, we have a victim, we have a hero, we have a villain, and we have a guide. And we will kind of like like a stick shift in a car, we will switch to different ones, right? And so if you get stuck in a victim stance, right, it doesn't mean that you're saying nothing, that you're denying the fact that you were maybe dealt a bad hand or an injustice, right? But it's, you don't stay in a disempowered state where you actually have a victim mindset, right? Where everything is happening to you. You're this passive receiver of bad things happening to you, and you have no say so in the situation. Where this guy, Hurricane, what's his name, Reuben Hurricane Carter, this boxer, he chose to maintain his power, and it kind of goes back to the first perception. He's like, I'm not gonna allow the things that I'm concerned about control me. I'm going to focus on what I can control. And I can control the fact that even though I'm incarcerated, um, I'm not going to allow my mind to be incarcerated. I'm not going to allow my heart to be incarcerated.
so, um, oh, sometimes it does come down to about changing the story, and I've discussed this like a little bit ago, which is changing the story you tell yourself, that self-talk. And that's just about, I don't know, about being in control. Pretty much every thoughts, your reactions, and your perception of whatever whatever outcome, whatever path that you're on. Just like Hurricane Carter, he was incarcerated for crimes that he didn't even commit, and he chose to be in control of his thoughts, his reactions, his and to hold on to his power, not give it away. Um, and I think, like, no matter what, it's everything that we choose. Everything is going to be the idea that that we tell ourselves within that self-talk. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, I mean, it doesn't matter, because whatever you tell yourself is what you're going to like lead with.
I think that it's important to know that we are also the narrator, right?
Yeah.
We are the narrator. It's kind of like I was watching Christmas Story with my family, right? And it's like Ralphie, you see him as a kid going through it, and then you hear the narrator, which is him, right,
Oh,
talking about his life, and it's almost like being able to hover above yourself and be able to see what your options are, and you know, being able to give yourself some advice or some direction, or say, you know what, here's how we're going to edit the story, here's how we're going to write it, and it's really what we choose to focus on, right? Kind of like how if someone has a video camera and they're filming a movie, right? They, depending how they frame it, right, determines on what you see. And that's really the focus of the frame. And so if we learn to focus on the good parts, right, that helps us to be empowered. And our story is no longer such a nightmare if we're in a really bad situation like Carter there, and who was wrongly
I
imprisoned.
I couldn't even imagine.
No, that's crazy.
I mean, it's easy to say like choose a path of power and stuff like that. I mean, he actually did it. Um, that's very awesome. But I'm just hoping that everybody out there, no matter how much they think that they're dug in a hole, that they do choose to get that power back. Because a lot of times it's just getting that power will empower yourself to get out of whatever situation that you may be in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just don't, I would hope that you guys don't take the victim stance in the sense of like giving up. Just always know that you do have the power.
Yeah.
So choose a path. So this last part that's discussing about perception is altering your perspective. So it's pretty much like the way that you look at something, the way you perceive it is what determines whether it's frightening or exciting, fun or miserable, good or bad. So the example that Ryan Holiday used in this book that we're going over right now for the obstacles of the way is who was it? It was
Pericles.
Pericles. Yes. How Pericles they were on a boat or something like that. Something about with the solar eclipse, and the big thing is what they perceived as a solar eclipse was something huge. So it pretty much
Like a
made
bad omen.
it made day into pretty much night, and so everybody like kind of freaked out about it. So pretty much what he did is he had a cloak, took it off, put it in front of the what do you what do
The
they call them?
helmsman.
Yes, the helms. I was going to say the steerer or yeah,
Steerer.
steerer.
That works too.
Uh, put it over his eyes, and it was dark. And so he asked him. He was like, "So are you afraid of this darkness?" And he said, "No." And he's like, "Well, why would you be afraid of the other darkness and not this darkness?" So it's pretty much the way they see it. He knew what other darkness was like. You could be in your room and you could turn off the light and it's dark and you're not going to be scared or anything, because what you perceived it before is, well, I just turn off the light, like it's time to go to sleep or whatever the case may be. But when it came to the helmsman and everybody else that was on the boat, the solar eclipse was like a bad omen. So I mean, they perceived it as bad, and so they just kind of, I don't know, freaked out a little bit, I would say.
Yeah.
So it
That,
definitely was frightening and miserable, I would say, for them.
yeah. It reminds me, like in a personal example, is like sometimes when I have to speak in front of people, right? It's like the build up, I get like
Yeah,
anxiety, and you don't want to say nothing stupid, or just it's just
focusing on the future.
it's just a stressor of having to perform, right, so to speak. Even though you're being yourself, it's still all eyes on you, and especially if you're not, you don't like that. It's something that you have feelings about. But anyways, I remember I heard someone saying that nervousness you feel, your body doesn't know the difference. It's all about the story you tell yourself. And this guy gave this tip, and it always stuck with me. He says, tell yourself, this is exciting. This is exciting. This is exciting, right? Instead of it's scary. And so that's what I started to do. Like, this is exciting. And then once I start saying that, and then my little self-talk says, this is stupid. You know, this ain't exciting. You're scared, right? But the more I say it to myself, this is exciting, it reminds me that I'm going into a place of having an opportunity to be able to speak about things I think, things that I believe, and that I'm actually in a privileged position to be able to have people willing to listen to me and to basically, man, take full advantage of that. It's an opportunity. Right. Going back to the very first thing, it's an opportunity in some emotional adversity that I'm going through at the time. Right.
And it's weird because I have the exact same thing. Like before I go up and talk to, I don't know, a group of people or something like that, I always feel like that anxiety. But it's about choosing what you're going to do with it, because literally it is up to you. Like you could tell yourself that you're scared. You could tell yourself this, but you can also tell yourself that it's an opportunity for advancement. And not necessarily in like the business sense, or, oh, well, if I do this, I'm going to move up in the rankings at work or anything like that, but pretty much within like personal growth. And I think with, and I think with personal growth, there is always obstacles. And sometimes it does come down to the whole thing of the obstacle is the way. Because I mean, we literally control our own perspective, and the perception is everything. Because if not, then I think we're going to go back to the whole thing of the Rockefeller thing, where everybody was running around with their head cut off, and he was just kind of stood still and just to kind of see what was going on, and he wasn't going to take it to where it didn't need to be taken to.
Yeah. I think that's one of the hard things. You know, it says you control your perspective and perception is everything. It sounds so freaking easy, you know, but being able to have that self-awareness to capture your own thoughts and to kind of like bring them into subjection to your will it's not always easy. It takes practice, you know, because your emotions feel so much more real than this alternative narrative you want to give yourself.
Totally agree. So next week we will be going into the action part of it. And a lot of times, depending on the perspective you take, is going to be dependent on the action that you give it. And you can either take it and run scared with it, or you can be like Hurricane Carter. You could be like Rockefeller, one of them, and you can take control of it and not let it dictate into a spot that you don't want to be. So pretty much it's comes down to like, what's your next action? Perception is everything. So what's up? What'd you get?
Well, just want to say thank you guys for. Are we done? Or are you asking me?
Asking.
Okay. I think.
Give me an elevator pitch of it.
An elevator pitch of it is just to be aware that when you encounter a problem, that problem is actually an invitation for your personal growth. And if you so choose to look at it that way, and it is a choice.
I agree. Everything's going to be a choice, and accept any obstacle within any of your paths as an invitation to move forward. And what then going forward, I believe that it will help you in your personal growth.
Yeah.
So with that being said, thank you for listening, watching us, if you're watching on YouTube or something else, and we will see you next week. Right, Carlos?
Yep. Next week. Thank you for listening to the Creative Whole Podcast.
Peace.